travel isn't just about destinations. It's about the people you meet, the cultures you immerse yourself in, the stories you carry home. I'm Relebogile Mabocha, and on my travel feature, I take you on a journey beyond the guidebook. Each week, I connect with fellow travelers, insiders, and storytellers to bring you the heart of every place. Whether it's a hidden gem right here in South Africa or a dream destination abroad. Join me as we travel through conversations, memories, and inspiration. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Something a little different in our travel segment today, because instead of talking about an individual destination or experience, we want to ponder a bit the question of why we travel, what the experience offers us that moves or shapes us in different ways, how we can make more of the experience of travel and help travel to live more fulfilling lives, help use travel to live more fulfilling lives, rather. These are the kinds of questions that are posed in a new travel book called Why We Travel, A Journey into Human Motivation. Now, the author is Ash Bhardwaj, who is an award-winning journalist and broadcaster who has reported across the world for everyone from the BBC to the Sunday Times to the Condé Nast Traveller and more. And he's joining us this afternoon via Zoom. It's great to have you with us, Ash. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Pippa. Thanks very much for having me.
It's my great pleasure, and such a pleasure to have a chance to dip into your book in advance of this interview and read. I could have got lost in all the anecdotes of the amazing travels you've enjoyed. Ash, have you kept track of the number of countries you've visited over the years?
Not really, Pippa. And the reason is I think number isn't a good metric for the quality of travel that you do. You know, you could change planes somewhere, and some people might count that as having visited a destination. And the idea that you could do or complete a country is quite silly, really. I mean, I live in London now, and the idea that I've even done London doesn't really make sense. And I think it's more about the quality of experiences that are relevant to you in a place when you go there, rather than just the sheer number of places that you've been.
I asked the question very deliberately to provoke that answer, Ash, because having read your book, I can see that for you, it is about the experience of travel, the immersion in cultures, the questions that you ask yourself and about the place you come from in the process of visiting another place that makes travel a rich experience. It's not about a checkbox, sort of tick off a list experience for you. You write in the opening, travel is the driving force of my life. Now, obviously for you, it's brought you not only widespread professional work, but obviously massive personal growth and satisfaction. Was the concept of being somebody who was curious about new places and new cultures something that was embedded in you in childhood?
I think so. I mean, the curiosity probably came from two sources. One was my mum, who always just took absolute delight and joy in everywhere we went. And we didn't have loads of money when we were kids, so that was just traveling around the UK. But she would always point things out and make me appreciate the changes from different parts of England, from growing up near London to going to visit places like Devon. But also watching Star Trek, I think that kind of made me think about the joy of different cultures and different places. And a few documentaries that I watched as a kid, Michael Palin, who's done a lot of stuff for various different TV channels. But for me, the journey that really triggered my curiosity in travel specifically, and how I could find curiosity and develop it by traveling abroad, was by visiting New Zealand. I played rugby, not to a particularly high standard, I have to say, but I did manage to squeeze onto the second 15 at my school by playing the position of prop, which, as many of your listeners will know, is the most skilled position in rugby. You just have to lean on people. And that got me onto a subsidised rugby tour that took me to Australia, New Zealand and the Cook Islands. And it was arriving in New Zealand and seeing this remarkable biculturalism with the prominence of the indigenous Maori people, and contrasting with that with how different that was from Australia, where I didn't see much prominence of the indigenous people in Australian society. That made me just think, why are these two places so different when in my head, before I'd gone there, they seemed so similar? And I then returned to New Zealand quite a lot as a journalist. I even moved to live there and spent time uncovering that story. And what that did is it gave me a reason to visit different parts of New Zealand. It gave me a reason to speak to people and try and dig underneath the surface of what was different about New Zealand from its history, from the social movements that occurred there in the 50s and 60s and 70s, the challenges that it still faces today. And it gave me a fascinating route around the country that made it more than just a sightseeing experience.
Ash, this idea of different ways of traveling and how much you are prepared to put into the experience dictates a lot of how much you get out of it is something that fascinated me in your book, because you reference several examples of different kinds of travel and different motivations for going traveling. And you rightly acknowledge that for some people, the opportunity to travel, firstly, will be limited. But secondly, it may be about more about what they're escaping from than what they're going to. That for some, the idea of an island holiday or a break at the beachfront for a couple of days just to have a change of scenery and a chance to sleep late and not be grinding through a 9-to-5 job, that is enough. And for them, it's travel that needs to be fun and relaxing and nothing more than that. For others, it can be a much deeper quest for cultural connection, for meeting people, for making the effort to interact with locals. And each has its place. It's not to say that one is necessarily better than the other, but you make the point that if you are prepared to put yourself out there a little bit more and go searching a little bit more, make more of a quest of it, I guess, is a phrase I would use. The opportunities for that travel to enrich you in different ways are perhaps bigger. Do you think that's something that more people should contemplate?
Absolutely. And I think I really like to stress there's no hierarchy in travel. If you're somebody that, we all have busy jobs, we all have busy lives, and we have stress in our lives. And if just taking 2 weeks to go and sit in a beach resort and the only thing you need to think about is which cocktail you want to drink or what you want to have for dinner, because that's what you need almost as a form of healing and recuperation from the stress of life. Yeah. That's a perfectly legitimate reason to travel. And also, I think that if you are going on holiday for those reasons, just rest and recuperation, by asking yourself certain questions and digging beneath the surface, you can have a more fulfilling travel experience. Going back to that point I made about New Zealand, I didn't spend loads more time on each of those trips, but by having that extra curiosity, I was able to engage in the place a little bit more, ate more interesting food, met more interesting people, saw more remarkable places, because that curiosity just took me that extra step further. So it's not a case of traveling further or spending more money. It's on the trips or holidays that you already have planned. What can you do in advance and during your trip that will make that whole trip more fulfilling and more rewarding, and maybe not just help you with hedonism and fun or rest and recuperation, but also help stimulate you culturally or maybe reveal something more about the place. And, a really easy example is wine. And, your country is a fantastic example of this. You could just sit in a bar downtown and drink wine and the wine will still be nice. Or you can go up to the Highlands and visit the people that are making it. It's not going to cost you a huge amount more money to go and do that, maybe a bit of time to travel up there. But you'll then meet the people who are producing it. You'll understand their history. Yeah. You'll start to get a sense of how the climate, the weather, the geography, the geology affects all of these different things. And I guarantee you the wine will taste even better than it does in the bar downtown.
You're talking about a layer of richness to the experience that wasn't there before. And I was so intrigued to see you mention this with reference to the movie The Beach with Leonardo DiCaprio, because, Ash, we know that as one of the stories of travel gone horribly wrong in terms of making a destination so popular that they actually had to close it down and say no more tourists for several years to allow the space to recover from the carnage that the visitors had wreaked on that space. And you make the point not so much about the damage done by over-tourism, but about the fact that movie predicts a traveller going into a foreign country without ever appearing to have any interest in engaging with the local culture whatsoever. It was a very interesting example, particularly given what we know happened at that destination.
Absolutely. And if you think about the way we think of travel, backpacker travel, which is the story of the beach, it's very easy to go somewhere and spend all of your time with other people that are just like you. Other people, in my case, from the UK, other parts of Europe, the US, South Africa, New Zealand, Israel, Australia. Those are the kind of people you tend to meet whilst backpacking. And it's very easy to just be passing through a place and almost consuming it. You're maybe eating the food, maybe visiting the temples, seeing the waterfalls. You're making the most out of the difference in currency value, but you're not necessarily engaging with a place. And there are ways to kind of go beyond that, to find new ways to engage with a place. One is to just stay in a single place for a little while longer. And the other is to just find things that you can engage with in the local community. That might be as easy as asking the people that run and work in the hostel that you're staying in, because they'll usually be locals themselves, about where do they spend their time. it might be the chance to engage in local activities or hobbies, or you might want to do an art class or a yoga class. If I was, if I was to travel around South Africa, it'd be really an easy way to engage with local culture would be to join a local rugby team. And suddenly you start to get to know people from that place rather than just traveling through the tourist highway. And it does require a bit of effort. In those instances, it usually requires a bit more time. But it's definitely something we can do to push our experience beyond just a sort of consumerism.
I just want to pause and say that for anybody who's come late into this interview and might be wondering who you're listening to, my guest is Ash Bhardwaj, whose new book is called Why We Travel, A Journey into Human Motivation. He is a long-standing travel journalist who's worked for top publications all over the world. But this new book is not just a series of anecdotes of the places he's been. As much as it is packed with interesting observations and stories, it's really about causing us to question more deeply, what are we looking for from the experience of travel? What is our motivation for going, and how can we deepen and enrich the experience of travel by stopping to question that motivation? Now, the book does touch on the issue of destinations that are victims of their own popularity, if we can put it that way. We've mentioned the story in Thailand with the particular beach. I know we've seen Venice moving to limit visitor numbers quite recently. Other destinations are talking about doing the same thing. And you cite the example in this book of what's happened at Ibiza as a really interesting example of how the explosion of popularity of a destination has actually changed the way it is experienced by future generations of travelers. Do you want to just tell our listeners a little bit about what you've seen change in the experience of Ibiza, the original party island that was such an all-encompassing, everybody's welcome, it doesn't matter who you are or where you come from or how much you earn, you're all here to have fun together. That's not really what happens there anymore, is it, Ash?
I think Ibiza is an amazing example of the evolution of tourism in a place, and it shows you the real opportunities of tourism in a place, but it also shows what happens when it just, as you say, it becomes a victim of its own success. So Ibiza is a small island in the Mediterranean off the coast of Spain in a group of islands called the Balearics. And in the 1950s, Spain was coming out of the Civil War. The Franco regime, the fascist regime, was still in power, and Ibiza was effectively a small backwater, bit of subsistence farming, a bit of fishing, a bit of salt production. And Spain opened itself to tourism, and that was a really good way for foreign currency to come into the country. So for an island like Ibiza, suddenly in the 1950s and 60s, you'd have tens of thousands of people arriving each year, bringing in money. And that was amazing for the locals because they were able to suddenly change their lives. They were able to generate businesses, they were able to sustain themselves. And people that had property in parts of the island that previously weren't very valuable on the coast suddenly became the people that had money coming into them. So for a couple of generations, it was fantastic. You had this new source of revenue and it developed the economy. And the people that went there, they enjoyed the sense of freedom they could have there. It was a place where you could, as you say, be who you want. And in the 60s and 70s, it was very tolerant of the LGBTQ plus community and hippies and others that may have been rejected by more typical tourist destinations. But by the 90s, you start to have this huge surge of tourism, particularly from the UK, but also Germany and other countries in Europe, for cheap flights and package holidays. That, again, was good for some business, but it was a very different experience. And the clubbing scene combined all of these different things together. Yeah. And by now, I think you get nearly 4 million visitors a year to Ibiza. 4 million a year, from tens of thousands in the 50s and 60s. And the island isn't any bigger. And so for the people that live there that weren't from these families that made huge wealth as a product of the early tourism and then through the 80s and 90s, the kids that aren't born into those privileged families, they just have to work in the economy that's available, which in Ibiza is largely only tourism. And that creates resentment. And also because so much of the good land and property is taken up by accommodation for tourists, it's very expensive and unaffordable for locals to buy property or to rent even. And so you have this cost of living crisis, you have this employment constriction in that people can only work in tourism. And the island almost exists, all of the infrastructure, all of the businesses exists to support tourism rather than to support the locals, because there's not really much else other work on the island. Yeah. So that ends up creating resentment. And the other thing is the entire tourism experience changes because the things that were originally magical, like the big outdoor nightclubs or the DJ sunset terraces, people have seen that, replicated it, commodified it. And the term that I use in the book, which comes from an academic, is Disneyfication, where you don't have the original sort of heartfelt feeling. You just have a copy of it that is just marketed as a product. So some of the essence and the vibe has gone. And because so many people want to go there, it's just become incredibly expensive as well to spend time there. So Ibiza is not going to stop being popular. It's not going to stop being a tourist destination, but fewer and fewer people are going to be able to afford it. And other places have now developed new opportunities for holiday making. And in the Mediterranean, an area that has become very popular in the last few years is Albania. Yep. It's very affordable in comparison. It's replicated some of the better elements or more popular elements of Ibiza, the outdoor clubs, the sunset terraces, the beaches, and all of that. But it is affordable. And so what you end up with is places become saturated, they change, they evolve in the type of tourism they offer, and then new places start to pop up as alternatives. But, Ibiza will always be the apex party island. Venice will always be the apex classic romantic canal place to visit. Rome will always be the apex grand Roman tourism place to go and see the sights. And what it does mean for those of us that aren't wealthy is we're gradually just going to get pushed out of these places. Yeah. But there are other amazing places around the world to visit. There are much worse outcomes of tourism, as we've seen in places like Cambodia, Kenya, and Thailand. Child sexual exploitation, the development of business orphanages where people are paying to volunteer, but that money's not going back into the local community. And the tourists in those instances, obviously those that are doing exploitation of kids directly, they're awful people. But many of the people that are going to volunteer in these business orphanages think they're doing something good, but their money isn't going in the right place. And so the tip I'd say to people is, if you're going somewhere and you're going to do volunteering, do some research. Child Safe International are a great organization for telling you whether or not a charity is authentic. But also, how do you spend your money? Are you spending your money in hotels that are corporate owned and all the money leaves the country? Or are you staying in a local owned hostel where it's run by a local family and the money's going back into that community? So by being aware of some of these challenges, you can actually start to use your tourist money in a way that is better for the local community and not just damaging.
Ash Bhardwaj, it's been fascinating chatting to you today, and I've really enjoyed reading your book, Why We Travel, A Journey into Human Motivation. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. And to listeners, I really encourage you to look for the book, which is out on shelves now. It is published by Bedford Square, distributed in South Africa via Jonathan Ball Publishers, and you'll find it retailing at about 390 Rand a copy, full of also amazing anecdotes of Ash's own travels and looking at some of the common motivating factors, be it curiosity, be it travel as a way of healing, and so much more for us to contemplate and think more deeply and travel more consciously going forward. I've thoroughly enjoyed reading the book. I recommend it highly. Why We Travel by Ash Bhardwaj.
Travel isn't just about destinations. It's about the people you meet, the cultures you immerse yourself in, the stories you carry home. I'm Relebogile Mabotja, and on my travel feature, I take you on a journey beyond the guidebook. Each week, I connect with fellow travelers, insiders, and storytellers to bring you the heart of every place, whether it's a hidden gem right here in South Africa or a dream destination abroad. Join me as we travel through conversations, memories, and inspiration. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.